Hello, podcast lovers. Thank you so much for tuning back in. I'm your host, Jana, and today we're having an amazing guest. Jessi was so kind to reach out to me, and we had like a personal conversation, and we actually dived so deep into that conversation, and we right away resonated on so many levels. But first of all, I would like to say thank you, Jessi, for being here. Thank you for your time. I'm truly appreciative of you. I felt immediately an energy connection to you. And I think that our conversation today, when we're just talking about accountability and leveling up in general, and we'll dive deeper into that, will bring a lot of clarity and hopefully we'll be able to share some light. So, but first of all, thank you and hello.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And yes, we had an amazing, heartfelt conversation just upon first meeting. And I am excited to dive into this conversation with you today.
Yes, same here. So, I remember when we first started to talk, and I know that you on yourself, you have a podcast too, Everybody Can Go. And I think immediately we resonated with that too, because it's, obviously we're fellow coworkers.
Hmm.
Like spreading good and spreading light all over the globe, hopefully. And so, but when we talked about really that part of like, just leveling up and we dive deeper into energies and what it really means for us to becoming who we were really created to be. I'm so curious, just to dive in a little bit more of that part of, when maybe, for instance, in your own life, you can share a little bit when that first started to happen to you, when you felt like, okay, something internally inside of me is changing. I'm not Jessi anymore that I used to be. I still have like cool character traits about me that I like, but then I'm shedding some layers of myself that they don't serve me anymore. What was things that you experienced for yourself where you're like, oh wow, I like that I'm growing, but this unfortunately comes with this too. And I wasn't even encountering on that to come with it. So what was something like that maybe for you?
So, going all the way back, I know that I noticed in retrospect that that's something that happens when you're transitioning from middle school to high school to college, college into adulthood. But the big moment when I realized that this was a thing was well into adulthood. There was so this is post undergrad. All of these the a large friend group that we had, social circle, there started to be a lot of dynamics that changed. And it came around a time when you get everything and then you lose it all. You get everything again, but it's better this time. And I was in a transition of losing my job. I had to move out of, give up my apartment. It was the a more responsible decision for me to turn my car in and not just kind of wait until it got repoed or something like that.
Right.
And I started to notice that all of these friends that were around when it was time for parties or time for like going to the club partying, doing all this stuff for all the photo ops, all of the social media stuff, and some of those same people, they were there for the not so good times as well. But once I started to make a commitment to my personal growth in a deeper way, it wasn't just being a part of the rat race. Like, okay, if you want to get things back, just grind harder, grind smarter, just do a little bit more. Once I like took a real a real stab at it, and I started to listen to motivational videos. I started to think a little bit differently about what it looked like to level up, not just look at it in a sense of financial gain, but also looking at it in a sense of mental health, emotional health, spiritual health. We have the finances in there, but also relationships. It caused me to take a look at some of the people who were starting to pull away. And
Mhm.
for me, with my story, it ended up being a whole big blow up with a bunch of drama, way out of left field. I didn't even know it was coming. And I was like, "Wait, wow, okay, so, like, what happened? What's wrong?" And when I really took a step back and started to look at, like, I'm all about self-assessment and accountability. So I'm like, for someone to blow up on me like that, there must have been something that I said. There must have been something that I did to cause another person to lash out at me, to be angry with me, to like get online and say all these mean things about me. And I reached out several times, like, hey, I'm not sure what all this is about, but like, what's going on? And it
Mhm.
was, met with deaf ears. I never did get a straightforward answer that I am upset with you because A, B, and C. It was just, hey, you're a terrible person. I'm lashing out at you, and I don't like you anymore. Very elementary, in the way that it was handled. And after a while, I said, well, okay. Um, and when I started to examine what those relationships and so-called friendships looked like, it was really not really a friendship. When you look at those things in retrospect, you are able to see a lot of the red flags that you may have missed out on, or a lot of the things that we always say, "Oh, that's just the way such and such is." And
Right.
we kind of end up covering for other people's bad behavior, for their negative traits, negative habits, for some of
Right.
the poor ways that we're treated. And yeah, once we had the big blow up, I had to do some self reflection on how did I end up here.
Yeah. Yeah, I can resonate. So many things that you just said. I want to touch base on when you said self-reflectance and doing the mirror work with yourself, that you're really big on that. I think
Hmm.
that's really a step that, for me personally, I did that naturally, but I don't think that that's so naturally to come to everybody. And even though
Hmm.
I used to practice it naturally on my own, I would still find myself in situations that you just described. And yet still, it would even pain me more because it's like, okay, I don't recall me ever doing anything that would make you react this way towards me, but what was it really? And then, when you talked about that, it was like a big blow up and people just started to remove themselves. My first thought when you said that was, it seemed like that your spirit disturbed their demons really badly in
Hmm.
some kind of way, where you started to really, like you said, mind, body, soul, you started to really not only look at how can I level up in specific things where I really now, as a grown up, want to make good decisions, but also as a female because I feel like, we as females, when we are single, for instance, we have to be very smart about decisions. We have to be very intelligent of what the next move can be. Can we do this if we have kids, for instance, or whatever? It's even more. And I feel like,
Hmm.
when all of those things come and you're not so spiritually rooted and you're not grounded in something really, then it's really difficult because so much distraction is happening already around us. And then how do we really stay at inner peace where we're like, okay, this is a lot, but how do I really strategically, by being spiritually rooted, by being emotionally intelligent, but also by being mentally prepared to take all of this on, how do I really go about that? But, now that you look back at that and you gained obviously so much knowledge out of that. Did it still hurt though, emotionally, when those people removed themselves from you and you're like, well, we invested time, we invested conversations, we invested, secrets with each other, or I was there, wiping your tears, or you was holding my hair when I threw up after a party, for instance, but like, how did you deal with that? Like, was that something where you just said, you know what, I'm just radically accepting that and moving on and I'm letting it go with love? Or did you actually took time to really dwell on it mentally and find the puzzle pieces, what actually had happened?
Yes, I did actually have to take some time to work through it. What I ended up doing, at one point, I was in prayer one day and I asked God, I'm like, well, why did you let everybody leave me? Like, why am I by myself? And the only thing that I heard back was, you aren't by yourself. Everyone didn't abandon you. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? And it's like, who's left? And from that, I got, okay, focus on who is here. And when I took inventory of the friends that were still there, there were two of my best friends popped up in my head. and they were from two different friend circles. And so, not a part of that same one of them was from that big circle of friends that kinda, like, blew up and fell apart, and,
Mhm.
the other was someone who was, from a different circle that we've been friends since high school, and we'd, transcended through several different social circles together as we grew up into adulthood, and
Right.
I'm like, "Okay, well, I see the 2 people that you're showing me, but what does that have to do with anything?" And the last thing that I got was, "What do they have in common? What do you 3 have in common?" And I'm like, "Okay, well, what do we have in common?" And that's where he's like, "Go out into the wild, like, you know the rest." And when I really sat and thought about it, the thing that the 3 of us had in common was really simple, but, sometimes simple doesn't mean easy. The thing that we had in common was growth. And so
Mhm.
that made me look back at the relationships that I was in mourning about, that I was grieving, and I looked at where I met each person, what we were doing at the time. And
Right.
so I started to realize that there were people who we'd met each other 10 years prior, 15 years prior, and I'm like, "Okay, well, what were we doing back in 2010? Okay, what were we doing in 2015? Okay, what are we doing in 2018?" And what I started to notice was that the people who I was still in good relationship with, they were people that from the time that I met them to now, we had overall gone on that stock market trajectory up. Even though there were ups and downs, the
Right.
overall trajectory was in an upward slant. Those people who they were all of a sudden mad at me and mad at anybody that took my side, which I never told anybody to pick a side because I'm not that type of person. But there were people that it's like, oh, well, if we're choosing sides, I'm choosing your side. And I'm like, oh, no, don't do that. I don't want to force anybody to, and it's not your choice. I'm going with you. Oh, well, okay. And what I noticed about those people who attempted to pit people against me, went on a cyberbullying and doxing campaign and all of these other things that were trying to force or bully other people into making a choice. It's her or it's us. All of
Mhm.
those people were in the exact same spot that they were when I met them. And I'm talking across all 5, like, I talk about 5 pillars in life, the financial, physical, spiritual, mental, emotional, and your relationships. And when I looked at where I met them, there was no upward trajectory. It was kinda just very flat
Mhm.
looking at
Stagnant.
their level of growth. And so I
Mm.
started to see that there was a clear gap. Now that we're down here in 2018, 2019, there's a very clear gap in what our relationship looks like.
Right.
But I thought that everybody could go. So I'm like, oh no, if I can do it, you can do it. But the fact is, everybody doesn't want to and won't put in the work to do it.
Mhm. I feel yeah, I agree, and it's not necessarily, and I want to add at least to that, but I feel like it's not just necessarily that they won't and they're not willing, but it's also simply that they're not aware enough because they do not do the self check-in on regular basis, because they just go about life and everything seems to be going a normal way. And why rock a boat if it doesn't need to be rocked kind of mentality? You know
Mhm.
what I mean? So there isn't even like a craving of what is more out there. What is it really that I was actually meant to do with my life? Like, who am I for real? And what is really the complete idea for me to be doing in this lifetime? And I feel like sometimes we get so content with things, and we don't want to leave our comfort zone. So really, when then people like you, for instance, come out of the gates of like a complete kind of transformational thing where it's like, okay, last year I was here, but this year all of these things had added and my mental and my spiritual ability grew. It kind of is intimidating for people when they're not at the same level. So for me in my life, I noticed once I got to specific levels for myself, and listen, I'm not saying this level is better than that. I'm just speaking in my
Mhm.
own personal growth level when I was moving upwards for me, because I know best how I was 5 years ago and 10 years ago, and so on. I felt that people also step back on their own, because nothing had happened necessarily. There was no argument, there was no negativity, there was nothing. It just sort of organically had happened that people started to automatically fall back because this was one of my prayers. For me,
Mhm.
anything, anybody that isn't serving me in my highest and best, it might be any situation, any person, any circumstance, shall be just removed from me. Either they can remove themselves or God will put me in a place where I'm being able to remove myself. And so I feel like sometimes when that happens, it's kind of, when you said, when you looked at the three people that you had in your circle, you all had the same common narrative, which is growth. And
Mhm.
so alone for you to realize that, I feel like that's very mature. That's on another level of maturity where you really, in all honesty, can sit down and be like, okay, you know what? This is really, because it really means that you're actually thinking and praying over stuff, because stuff will be then now shown to you, which means that spend solitude in your own self in order even to find out what's happening. And I think that's something, for myself, I can say at least it's something that it's really healthy. Is this something that you like to do on regular basis, where you just take time to yourself in solitude and just kind of like really think in peace about certain things and like drive after a specific growth? Or would you say for you it just came naturally where you're like, oh, cool, yeah, I like that. Now I'm walking with that. Or was it an intentional idea where it's like, I would really like to master this or that?
So, I initially started on my personal growth journey intentionally out of necessity. I was just really having a hard time and went through like a state of being depressed. I felt like I was at a standstill. The vision that I had for my life, it just wasn't, I'm like, things are not adding up. Things are not just, things weren't going right. It wasn't that like things were going totally wrong, but I got to a certain place in my career, a certain place in accomplishments and all of the outer things, but I was still like, I had this feeling that I'm like, ah, like there has to be something else. There's something missing. There has to be something more. And while I started to like dig into like, okay, if I'm quote unquote doing good, why do I feel uncomfortable or why do I feel like there's a lack? And that is kind of what started me down the YouTube rabbit hole of looking at motivational videos and different things. And I watched on, it was like Netflix or something, one of the streaming services. I watched a movie called The Secret. And then you know how it says, if you liked this, you'll like these other things. And
Yeah.
I watched all of these videos and I was introduced to like motivational speaking and some of the different like manifestation and mindfulness techniques, which I was somewhat, I'd only tipped the iceberg on those types of ideologies and teachings and different things while I was in college. So I'd heard of all this stuff, but I didn't actually know what it looks like to put that into play in my own life. And so I started to study up on it a bit more, started to read into it a bit more. And as I started to dive into those things a bit more, I'm like, oh, there's something that I can apply to my own life directly. Let me take some of these things that I'm learning and the things that I can immediately put into action as soon as I'm done with the book, as soon as I'm done with the video, as soon as I'm done with the coaching. Let me put that into action now. And there were results that I could feel first. I started to feel different. I started to think differently, and therefore I started to make different decisions. And after a while, I started to see that those different decisions were giving me different results. And then those different results started to become like tangible, where other people were starting to see the results of what was coming out of me pursuing this personal growth journey. So I kind of just continued up until like here I am years later, still practicing some of the very same things that I started with and still being open to learning and growing and becoming a better version of myself every day.
Yeah, and I think that's very fascinating, and it's very admirable because this is really how we in my opinion, get to actually becoming who we were really created to be by really
Yeah.
taking those steps, and really allowing ourselves, just like you said, to really just feel. And I really loved how you expressed it because when you said it, it resonated so deeply with me. And I wish I would have written it down because that should be a quote on a t-shirt. When you said, you started to feel differently first, right? Which is so significant for me because this is exactly the part where I feel like currently globally, we're so stuck on that part. We're not feeling anymore. We're only rationally, radically making decisions from the head, but we're not allowing ourselves any more deeply to really feel how it feels actually to enter a room. And I feel
Mhm.
like again, when we unfortunately talk about, two different genders, we as females were being so often told, oh yeah, are you emotional? Are you getting emotional? Are this or that, whatever. And and from society, it has been so often put down that it felt like uncomfortable when you're not in an office and you feel really emotional. You don't want to show that because, it by society, it makes you look, not strong or not capable or whatever. But I'm glad that right now we're starting again to go back to that because, and I'm not saying acting out, I'm just saying feeling, really allowing what really comes up. If you're having a conversation with somebody, or if you are in a meeting, or if you are collaborating, or if you are anywhere and you feel that feeling, that internal intuition that maybe says this doesn't sit well, there's no need anymore to try to force anything. There's no need anymore to be like, okay, I like it when really you don't like it. It's okay to be authentic at this point. And I feel like when we start to do that in our own circle, it has kind of like a ripple effect because this is finally then really when we attract those people and those energies and that vibe tribe that actually vibes with us because they're just as authentic as you are now really becoming, you know? And so I'm happy that you, in a sense, are on the other side now because things look so different on the other side than from where it started, for me at least. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, I agree and have more to add to that, of course.
Mhm.
So it does feel it's like it feels different being on the other side of it in that because I was able to grow through it, not just go through it. I grew through that and I'm able to reach back and people that they're at the beginning of having that feeling, they're like, well, what am I supposed to do? I'm like, oh, you know what? I have a few things for you. Check out this, check out that, and give them resources to kind of help work their way through what it took me a few years to work my way through. It's like, oh, hey, you can have this squared away in a couple months, possibly even a couple weeks, or even get pre-prepared before you get to that point in life. But like some of the things that are the same, um, who I am at my core, those things are the same. The things that I value, they're the same. My principles, they're the same. How those things come out and how I'm able to manifest them in my life, that is what's changed. Because I mean, it's like when you start out in school, you don't stay in kindergarten forever. And I feel like there's like a kindergarten, elementary level of how those values and principles are manifested in your life. But then, there's the middle school level, the high school level, and it's like, do you want to be at the graduate school level of living out what your core values are and what are the things that you really believe in? And I will say that one thing that I've noticed is places that I had only dreamt of being back at that time, I'm now more open to the very same idea, but that same idea, I feel like it's wider and more expanded. I would say that what my vision looked like then, it was like basically written in that elementary format. You only have so much vocabulary to be able to explain it. But then when
Mhm.
you're talking about writing a term paper like at the collegiate level, it's like, oh, I have so much more language to explain the very same thing that you wrote like a 2-page paper on when you were in the 5th grade. That
Right,
same exact idea, it's
right,
expanded into a 30-page thesis or a 100-page thesis or whatever, because
right,
you have more knowledge, you've learned more, you have
right.
more ways to verbalize it, to express it, and also to the way different ways to experience it. So I
Mm.
think that is it's like just as much as things have changed, there are so many things that are still the same. They're just an evolved version of the things that quote unquote stay the same. So I guess they're things that have gone through an evolution. So I guess that would by definition be something that is different. But I
Right.
always look at the commonality in like those humble roots and those seeds that needed to be buried and had to be in the dark, and it had to rain on them. It had to get dirty in order to actually grow, bloom, and blossom into the plants and things that are bearing fruit now, so that it could become what it needed to long term.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But transitions like that can be challenging, can be not can be are most of the time transitions like that are very challenging, because I always like to compare to like a beautiful lotus that is like, in very murky water, and she needs so much strength to actually burst out and become this beautiful flower. But before she can, she's really under a whole lot of dirt, you know having to really navigate things through. But I feel like, the evolution part that you talked about, I feel like that's exactly when we talk about manifesting, that there are specific levels. And the verbiage that you talked about, I think that's really also another thing that could be added, because there's ways really how to manifest. There's really ways how to really visualize and how to really call things into your life. And
Mhm.
and not from a place of I need to and I want to so badly, but more from a secure place of like, I'm okay. This is really truly what I see myself, and this is really what I welcome, and this is really how I see my life flourish when this aspect or this scenario would occur. But whatever divine creator sees fit is okay by me anyway. And just finding again that contentment of like, I'm okay because I'm so rooted and I know that he has a plan for me. And do I have my own wishes? Yes. But like, when we speak those out, sometimes I feel like when we not use correct verbiage to speak to the universe, it's kind of like harder for them to deliver it, because you need to be very detailed, just like in a thesis, like you need to be very detailed writing, speaking what it really is that you're exactly trying to manifest. Because I remember when I started to manifest maybe 20 years ago, I manifested I wanted to be in the specific relationship with this specific person. And that's all I said. And that's exactly what I got. But I forgot to mention that I would like this man to be emotionally available. I forgot to mention that I wanted myself to be capable of speaking calmly about my own truth and about the needs that I need. And so I'm saying all of this to say that sometimes when we sit down and we try to say, oh, I would like this and that and whatever, we don't sometimes think about it really in depth, what it would mean if it really would be there, because we're not going into detail of really speaking about certain things. But I feel like when we're talking about manifesting, it's really important to speak in detail about certain things that we're really trying to call in, because, hey, we might just really get it. And then it's too late to change, because then it's there. But
Yes.
yeah, yeah. But just out of curiosity, from all of those friends, for instance, that kind of removed themselves from your circle, has anybody up till this point kind of like came back up and said, "Hey, remember then and then, and can we kind of like be friends again or something?" Or was that like a complete done deal? I'm just curious.
Um, it was mostly a complete done deal. I kind of by default, I guess, kind of had a rule of thumb that I'll reach out, see if there's a option for reconciliation. Uh, okay, if you don't answer, you ghosted me. Okay, maybe you need time to cool off. Maybe you need time to yourself or whatever. And I give it a while. I'll do another reach out just to see, would we like to have a conversation, remedy things, see if we're able to mend this dynamic. And after that, okay, you made your choice. But I don't block people. I don't like make sure that like, oh, you're completely cut off. Like my phone number has not changed in oh my goodness. Like I have nieces and nephews that are younger than my phone number. So like I don't block people from my phone, my social media, anything like that. So from my end, the door is always open for a conversation. If the person needs closure or anything like that, but I am completely fine with, I made my two attempts. I
Right.
don't need a third for the charm. And at the end of the day, I am to an area of acceptance where, one, I think that some of the people that broke away, they know that I am that way. That, you will be given an opportunity to handle this in a way that's mature, and in a way that's amicable and a win-win for everyone. But I also accept that for some people, their chosen style of communication or way of communicating is never admitting fault. It never includes an apology. It never includes having an actual productive conversation about conflict. It either involves complete avoidance, that we're just going to pretend it didn't happen, and, oh, hey, let's go get something to eat, or it involves the opposite end of that, being extremely combative, yelling, arguing, possible like physical fighting, those types of things. And if those two extremes are all that's being offered on the table, then I mean, if you're around, it doesn't take that much to be around me to know that I'm very blunt with it. Like, if there's a back and forth that it's like, oh no, your point is to argue. I'm not doing it. And like, it's to me, it's just that simple. Like, I know what my communicative boundaries are going to be. And so, approaching a situation, or approaching a challenge or a conflict with, like, oh, we're gonna yell and argue. No, I'm not. That's my boundary, and the boundary is for me. The boundary isn't to control what someone else is doing. You can yell from the treetops, from the rooftops, from wherever as much as you want to. You can search for an argument elsewhere, but I, however, am not responding to that. That's a boundary that I choose for myself. I will not engage. Um, and so, yeah, that's where I'm at with it. And so, everyone is able to choose, and has their choice or option. So, and I think I'm also fairly firm in that I don't have a revolving door of I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry,
Right.
I'm sorry. Because to
Right.
me, it like an actual apology, if you are really sorry about the pain that you caused, or a behavior that you have that is hurtful to another person or people, that you would actually like there would be change that accompanies those words.
Right, exactly. Yeah. I mean, action should always follow a specific behavior. I mean, excuse
Mhm.
me, a word should always follow a specific behavior. And I feel like, if that's not really a given, then there's no need even to actually even have a conversation. Because I
Yep.
truly got to a point where it's like, if your words don't match what your movement tells me, then I'm just not interested whatsoever. And when you
Yep.
spoke about boundaries, I think that's very important to have boundaries in general. It could be, with your children, it could be with your spouse, it could be with your friends, or with whomever. I think it's very important to really set those boundaries, but I feel like sometimes where we get a little bit intimidated of setting boundaries is because we don't want to rub anybody the wrong way, like we don't want to be like, okay, she's the complicated one, or she's the difficult one, or it always has to be how she says, or whatever. But to
Mhm.
me, it's like it has nothing to do with one person having clear, healthy boundaries, reasonable boundaries. When people, like you said, this is not for me to control your behavior. This is for me, for myself, just telling you that this is something until here and further, I'm not interested in engaging. But I'm so curious, why do people not take it that way? Why do people then come back and say, okay, that's very selfish of you. You're just not going to engage with me, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, I'm not, because you're going on a level that I'm not interested in. But I'm wondering, why is that not easily to be understood? Is it because, in your opinion, we're not on the same energy frequency level? Is it because we're not on the spiritual growth level? Or is it maybe because we accepted behavior like that, but now we just choose not to anymore?
What I think it boils down to and or starts with, and I was introduced to this concept a few years ago when I'm like, oh, that is definitely a thing. I think that sometimes when we are focusing on ourselves and our own personal growth, we don't realize that we are operating in what's called false humility.
Mm.
And the first time I heard of that concept, I'm like, well, what does that mean? Like, how are you falsely humble? You mean being fake? And the person explained, they were like, no, no, no. There comes a point where you operating in what we feel like is being humble, that we think that we're on the same playing field as everyone else. We confuse I'm not better than you with I'm different than you. And there are areas of my strength that I'm supposed to put out into the world that are supposed to, and my purpose, and I was meant to be able to cover other people where that is their area of weakness, and vice versa. There are other people in the world who are meant to fill in our weak spots and our gaps. And when
Mhm.
we're operating in that false humility, we're thinking that all of our strengths, all of our gifts, all of the things that we were meant to do better, operate better at it because it is our superpower, it is our strength. We're like, oh, it's just little old me. Anybody could do that. And um it becomes false because we're operating in a space where we're thinking that everybody else has the capacity, the propensity, and the superpower to do the very same things that we were sent here to do. And
Mhm.
it causes us to operate in a way that, one, we expect us out of other people. Then when we set those boundaries, we're thinking that the other person is going to react to us the way that we would react in our humble opinion, in our love, in our grace, in all of these things. We're thinking that the other person would react the way that we would if someone brought their challenge to us, or if someone said, "Oh, well, you hurt my feelings in this way." We're expecting for them to have the response that we would have. And that's simply just not true because we're all individuals and we're not the same people. I'll give you a brief story about one of the times that it clicked for me like blaringly loud when I heard about this false humility concept. I was always the planner for trips and different things. And I kind of thought that was just because I'm like, oh, you guys, let's go on an adventure. We're going to do dot 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 dot. And so there was a person in the friend group who they exhibited a red flag that at the time, because I'm expecting me out of everybody else. There was one person who spoke up and said, well, why does Jessica always get to plan the trips, and why does she get to create the itinerary and make the plans and everything? And I took that to heart, and I'm like, oh no, am I like overstepping boundaries? Am I being bossy? Am I making all these decisions for other people that they may not necessarily be happy with? And so someone on the side, they're like, "Oh, shut up, such and such. She's good at it." And I'm like, I'm still thinking to myself, well, just because I'm good at it doesn't mean that somebody else shouldn't have the opportunity. And the conversation that ensued later that day, that it really hit home for me, is someone sat me down and they're like, look, the reason why you get to do the planning for the group is because you take out the time to ask everybody what do they want to do. You go person by person and make sure that everybody gives you their full input on what this trip will look like and what things we will do. And you put together a full itinerary that is encompassing of everybody. The person that said that mean thing to you that made you feel bad, you're trying to make sure that you aren't being a bully, that you aren't forcing us to do all this stuff. You've really created community every time we go somewhere. That person that stood up in front of everyone and said, well, why does Jessica always get to do the planning? She wants the position of power and responsibility so that everybody has to do what she says. And she never considers what everyone else wants to do. There's a reason why you're the one that's always, quote unquote, in charge. And I'm like, oh, well, I never really thought of that because I was expecting me out of everyone else. I never considered that, well, if you're planning a trip for 10 people, how are you making a plan? How are you creating an itinerary of any kind if you haven't spoken to the other 9 people to find out, well, what do you want? I wouldn't just say, like, hey guys, this is what we're going to do, take it or leave it. It
Right.
never occurred to me for that to be a type of thinking.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's exactly the diverse thinking, that some that she in this instant didn't get at all,
Hmm.
and I think because it was, I think for her, because it was maybe so challenging to think like that outside of the box, let alone put an itinerary together, it's
Hmm.
easier to go back to like, talking and complaining about something because it does make you feel a little bit better. If you cannot step up to a plate where you so deeply want to step up to a plate, but then you point fingers at somebody else for that short, specific moment, it does make you feel better. But really, it's just a sign that there was no willingness of wanting to self grow, because this could have
Hmm.
also been in another way of like, wow, this is so amazing how you do that, like from a humble place. It would have been, she would have then approached it and said, this is so amazing how you do that, do you mind teaching me? Like, okay, this seems so overwhelming to me, in all honesty, but how do you go about that? Like, what is actually your idea? Just from friend to friend, like, this is amazing, can you teach me, can you show me? But I feel like
Hmm.
that's exactly when we go back to at the beginning of our conversation, that true authentic part, really that true authentic conversations, where sometimes those conversations will lead us into certain things where all of a sudden we find ourselves, we're the only one on this island. Nobody seems to have the same opinion like we do, and yet we're still standing strong in it. And that's because we're choosing us over anything and anyone. Not to say that it's selfishness, but it's really, in my opinion, healthy self love and healthy self
Hmm.
esteem towards oneself, and respect of like, you know what? This is truly what I believe in. I'm not here to convince anybody. I'm not here to argue with anybody. I'm not here to point fingers of how who is what doing in a different way. But this
Hmm.
is how I'm choosing for me to continue to do it. And if you're with me, great. And if you're not, then thank you for the ride up till here,
Hmm.
then that's your choice too. But I feel like, even thinking of that and not having any negative feelings attached to that is just a simple sign of true growth.
Yeah, yeah, I would definitely agree. And
Mhm.
that definitely makes me think of had a thought, and of course it totally left me from something that you said just now.
It's always like that. Say it all over again.
um but yeah, I it that puts me in the mind frame of thinking about the reason, season, and lifetime
Mhm.
concept when we're looking at the people that we're keeping in our midst. And sometimes when you talked about have it like, it was nice to know you, like, no, not in a sarcastic way. Seriously, it was nice to know you and the
Right.
things that we were able to give to each other during that time. Sometimes we start to think that because someone is around for 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, sometimes even more than that, we think that they automatically get a free pass to be a lifetime friend. And
Mhm.
even with that, we think that with being a lifetime friend, there's an expectation that the way that the friendship looks and grows is going to be exactly the same the entire time. And that simply isn't true.
Mhm.
Sometimes the season that we have with the person, it can be for years and years. But when it's time to let go, or time to release, or time to be released, sometimes we fight up against that, and that's a place that it can cause a pain point for us, them, or sometimes both of us. And also not being accepting of when you are talking about a lifetime friend and you guys are growing together doesn't just go in a straight line. How earlier I talked about those ups and downs on that upward trajectory. When you're
Right.
talking about being lifetime friends, as you guys are going on those ups and downs in your own life as an individual, sometimes you'll be, someone will be a little down, a little up, and it's going to fluctuate, and you guys will have different needs and things like that while you're going through that journey together. And remembering that and knowing healthy ways to navigate that will always be, I would say, fundamental to that to having that self-love that you talked about. That was the thing that I was thinking of when you were talking about self-love. It reminded me of when we're making that attempt to pour from an empty cup. And when you haven't filled yourself, and when you aren't making sure that you're showing up authentically as yourself, complete and whole, you aren't able to give people your true self, who you actually are. I
Right.
mean, it's kind of like a balloon. Like, yeah, I understand your good intentions. If you bought a dozen balloons and they sat in your car and it was hot outside and they started to deflate. So when you brought them in, half of them they're kind of like halfway floating. Some of them are completely deflated and just hanging down there. And then you may have one or two that are kind of holding up that bunch of balloons. And I understand your intention. I understand your heart, that you meant to do something great, but the truth of the matter is you didn't show up with all 12 balloons full, beautiful, vibrant. We aren't able to use them all throughout the wherever we're decorating for the party. And we don't realize it sometimes when we are partially empty or we have not completely filled ourselves. We always talk about that analogy of the teacup and the saucer, and pour from
Right.
your overflow, pour from the saucer. But I like to and talk about it in terms of bringing that dozen balloons, because you can see all the intention in the world when somebody brought them in, and it's like, oh no, there's still some good ones left. There are still good parts of you left, and there are still good parts of you that show up. But when you haven't made sure to fill yourself first so that you're able to give from your overflow, you aren't showing up to give that fullness of yourself. You're only able to give that partial dozen, because that's literally all you have. So I was thinking about that's part of the reason why it's so important to make sure that we are practicing that self-love, make sure that we got that self-care in so that we're able to maintain that high level of self-love and self-fulfillment, so that when we show up, we're showing up with that fully filled, pretty, vibrant, the whole dozen, and we aren't trying to give somebody the dozen balloons with a few of them are deflated and just hanging. They need to be snipped off, and there's the half-mast ones. There's the ones that it's like, oh, just bust the balloon and throw it in the trash.
Right. Yeah, I completely understand. And then, when you said about not only filling your own cup, but also when we talk about the friendships, for instance, or any relationships, therefore, that went on for years and years and years. And
Mhm,
I feel like the expectation, especially when a relationship or a friendship has been going on for a very long time, the very same way, where, for instance, one person always gave a little bit more or always kept a little bit more in touch. Like you said, you got some balloons back, but the
mhm,
one person would give all the time 12 full, nice balloons. But what would come back would be for years okay with the person. But now it started to be like, I'm just simply not okay with that anymore. This is seriously where I'm standing right now. And if you want to continue this friendship with me, this is kind of like my expectation, what you now need to bring to the table, which for me would be 12 nice balloons. And if you cannot do that, then again, thank you so much for this ride up till here. And thank you for all the things that you contributed and that you teach me. And I hope I was able to teach you something good too. But thank you, but no thank you. And I think
mhm,
it really always goes back to your own really inner truth worth. How much are you really worth to you to even ask such thing, to even have an expectation as such, to even have boundaries like that? I feel like it always starts within your own self by you asking yourself, do I need to be okay with this? Can I be okay with this? Do I want to be okay with this, or am I not? Yeah, I know I've been okay with it 20 years, but do I still have to today? Because I have the privilege of changing my mind. you
mhm.
know just like you, I have the privilege of literally saying for 20 years I didn't like avocados. And today I'm obsessed with avocados and I eat avocados now every day. Now, did I know that 10 years ago that one day I'll be obsessed with avocados? I didn't. But did I allow myself to really go with my own personal flow and my own spiritual growth and my own desire of wanting and being okay really to accept and like request certain things for myself? Yes, you know. And I feel like that sometimes it's also something where people are just like, oh wow, that's really how it's going to go down. Yes, because you are not
Mhm,
holding space for me. You're not able to simply hold space for me one time when here I was all these years holding space for you in anything, you know in anything that we went through, all your growth, all your tribulations and trials and whatever. But here I was holding space for you this entire time. But one time when I really needed you to hold space for me and I was transparent about what I really needed from you as a friend, then you couldn't hold space for me. You know what I mean? And so I think this is exactly just to show that it's there's no need to have hard feelings. Did it hurt? Yeah, it absolutely hurt. It just not too long happened to me personally with a friend. We were friends for
mhm,
13 years almost, and that's exactly what happened. I had asked her to step up and pointed out certain things that I did not like, how she spoke to me. And from then on, we haven't talked because she just couldn't take me being very authentic and very raw. Because for
mhm,
many, many, many years, I would just let it go and let it go by and just accept the things that she would give me, from her friendship was tremendous, a lot. But it became to a point for me where it just simply wasn't enough anymore.
mhm.
But
And that right there is what I was talking about with and it actually is key or pivotal moments in a friendship or relationship that
mm,
it can literally make or break the trajectory of what you guys' relationship looks like when you're having that very vulnerable moment
right,
and it's either there are literally those pivotal moments that it decides whether or not this is like we are to the end of a season and we do need to part ways, or whether or not it's like, hey, you have a new set of needs. Let's communicate about this. This is how I'm able to help you and show up for
right,
you. Or, hey, well, okay, I hear what you're saying. Help me help you. Tell me more about it. What are some instances? What would you have liked for me to say? Or what do you feel like is a better way for me to have communicated this thing that I said that was too harsh? And you guys are actually growing and evolving the relationship from there. But when you're met with that, well, not doing that, deuces, it's like, okay, that
right,
is the not having the conversation is a conversation in itself. And I think
right,
that sometimes people don't realize that though, and really, here's the question. Do they realize it and really just not care? Or are they emotionally unintelligent enough to not know that this pivotal moment is going to be a deciding factor in whether or not the season of the friendship will come to an end, or whether or not this is a
right,
moment of growth, not just
mm,
for each of you guys as an individual, but a moment of growth for the relationship itself, for that relationship, for that bond to be stronger, for you
exactly.
guys to, blossom a bit more in what your relationship looks like. And
Hmm.
I definitely one of the pivotal things for me that I noticed in that. One of my very best friends, one of the two people that was left, during the whole campaign of like, oh, Jessica's this horrible person, and she did this, she said that, da, 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 da. And she's like, hey, let's have a talk about some of these things. They're saying that you said all of these things, you said all of this stuff to my face. Well, remember when you said this? It yeah, it was true, but the way that you delivered it, it was really harsh. But I know what you meant. That's when it was, after letting her get some of the things out, that's when it was my turn to talk, to ask questions, because I was listening for understanding, not listening to respond, not listening to go back and forth. Well, no, I didn't do
Right,
that. It doesn't matter
right,
what I intended to do. We both already know that my intentions were to help. However, I didn't know that when I talked to you about A, B, and C, and I cut straight to the chase, that when I said it, that even though it was truth and it was something that you needed to hear, that I could have tapered my words. I could
Right.
have taken that extra 5 to 10 seconds so that I could think about, how do I say this, but not in a way that is direct as if we don't have an emotional connection? How can
Right.
I deliver this truth to you gently? And after we finished the conversation, we were actually supposed to be like going out to dinner or something like that. And we were going to have a quick 30-minute convo so that we could just, smooth out a misunderstanding. We ended up sitting and talking for almost 8 hours. And, like, there was never a point where we were, like, raising our voices, yelling at each other and stuff. We literally just sat there and had a heart to heart about some of the things that it's like, "Oh, well, you did this. I think that you meant this, but I felt like
Right.
this." And it's like, "Oh my god, I didn't know that." And we were
Right.
having all of these conversations, and it was almost like, oh, the thing that was meant to, like, destroy the friendship, we got to the end of it, and she's like, "You know what? Like, I feel so much closer to you now." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I'm glad that you said it because I wasn't gonna say that out loud, but like me too." And
Yeah.
I it really made me examine how it ended up something that was meant to completely break us apart. We were supposed to
Right.
argue and be like, "Oh, F you, I hate you, blah, blah, blah,
Right.
never talk again." It both of us being on a certain growth journey and a certain path, by communicating in the way that we communicated, it it solidified and made, actually, even though we had been friends for so long, it was like it created a foundation for a whole nother level of friendship for our
Mhm.
relationship to blossom. And I think that
Mhm.
sometimes people don't realize what you could be missing out on in terms of
Mm.
relationship or friendship when you won't allow yourself to be vulnerable and to communicate in a healthy way. When you are very quick to respond defensively as
Mhm.
opposed to responding to understand the other person's stance. And
Mhm.
that's a different level of emotional maturity and a different level of care and a different level of love that at this point, I'm not quite sure that everyone is capable of that. But I feel that the reason why everyone may not be capable of that, it goes right back to their level of self-healing and self-love, right back to where you brought up that self-love and how it's not selfish and not being able to show up even with the
Mhm.
3/4 of a cup,
Right.
when they come to the conversation. So
Yeah.
that thing about hurt people,
Yeah. It's it's
there's the
it's it's
truth.
it's the fact. Yeah, and and for me, it's also what you just said. The thing just alone, it's really courageous, in all honesty, for one to step up like that and really step to another human and to really speak truth on what they feel. You know what I mean? And you're right. As long as we're doing that in a respectful, calm, kind manner, it's really challenging. It's not easy to really muster up all your courage. And it could be, listen, it could be somebody that you have a crush on. It could be somebody you in love with, offer it, it could be a girlfriend for a long time. It could be a guy, like whatever. It's not easy to bring up that courage to be like, you know what, this is truly how I feel. And this is just really what I'm asking, what I'm needing in return. That's not
Mhm,
easy, even if you have self confidence, even then it's not easy because it's an uncomfortable conversation, but I feel like that authentic part when you spoke about, this will be the pivotal moment of a friendship where we either grow, or in any relationship, this could be our growing part where the reaction obviously would be like, okay, I'm so sorry. I never looked at it that way. I hear what you're saying. This is what I have to say. And I will tell you right away, this and this and this is something I can change and I can give, but this is something I won't. Are you still okay with that? Like, how can we find a middle ground where we just respect each other's requests, because this isn't about a one-way street. This isn't just about one person. Like a friendship, a partnership, a romantic, anything, a marriage, it always is about the unity itself. So those two people within this unity have the right to speak on what it is, what they need, what they desire, what they deserve, especially after many years. Because, let's be real, when you're with somebody for like 20 years together, like a romantic partner, there's certain things that you still desire in your own life, and with not good, healthy, open, transparent communication, it's going to be very challenging, you know, to really just be like, okay, this is seriously where I'm standing. And I'm happy to give everything to you, but this is also what I need. This is where I'm standing too. Can you come my way too? So we can make this kind of like a mutual reciprocity idea of like, I give you and you give me, because fundamentally, if I fill your cup every single day and you do the very same for me, I don't even see how this cannot work, even with the ups and downs, even with some arguments in
Mhm.
between, even with some whatever's in between, because if the intention is to love you the same way I learned with my healed self to love me, and you do the very same because you're healed, you took care of your wounds and you are healed and whole, and you now love you the way you love me, then I don't even see how it would not work at all.
Yes, yes,
So,
that's really good. I love that. Like that made me think of when I love some of the words you brought up to describe it, that mutualism, that reciprocity, and
yeah.
that brings me to thinking about how we don't necessarily always view relationship in those terms. We look at giving so much. In order for you to give, someone else has to take.
Right.
And we don't necessarily look at as givers and expecting us out of other people. We don't look at the whole, there's yin and yang, there's positive and negative. When you put the two opposite ends of the magnet together, they're going to attract. We're not looking at, oh, I have to gatekeep myself, take care of myself, without saying that me having that self love and care is selfish. You do have to gatekeep yourself as a giver because you are going to automatically attract takers. Now, can we be upset that takers are what and who they are? Sure, we don't have to like it, but if we are more self-aware and more aware of the people around us, their intentions, perhaps use our discernment, pay attention
Mhm.
to the behaviors that people are presenting, there
Mhm.
is a space where, as a giver, we are responsible for protecting ourselves, protecting our energy, protecting our gifts, and making
Right.
sure that the places where we're giving is the proper place. Um,
Right.
but I don't know where it's at in the Bible. I just know what the Bible says. I don't know what the verses are or whatever. But the scripture that talks about not do not cast your pearls before swine, we
Mhm.
don't think about, because it sounds rude to just call someone swine in real life, but we don't look at the practicality of that scripture when you're thinking about, okay, you do have to protect your gifts, and the gifts that you are supposed to give, they are meant for a specific set of people, but they aren't meant for you to just pass it out to everybody. People that are wasting it, people that may be in position so that they're able to get the energy or the gifts that you have, that it was supposed to come to the person that were behind them, or somebody in that back corner of the room that we were supposed to continue making our way around until we got to that person so that we could make that difference or that change in that person's life. But maybe we were being more extroverted that day at the party, and that person was an introvert, and we were supposed to make our way to them. But we're so busy and so preoccupied with being nice, with being a giver, that we are so nice that false humility again creeps in, and we're not able to just say, and of course, we don't have to say it to the people's face. This is just the analogy, but we aren't willing to say, oh, this person here, this person who is a taker, that is their sole purpose, is just to take without being mutual, without being reciprocal. This swine is in the way of me casting my pearls in the places where they are supposed to go, where my
Mhm.
purpose was meant to grow. And I'm I'm just wasting it out here. So, and just the same way that I said it, and you see how I had to put all those caveats in there so that I don't sound mean. Sometimes when we're being responsible with releasing our gifts into the world, and when we're being responsible and mature in what it looks like with how we need to show up, it's not going to always feel good. And even
Right.
though I'm a lover of pink, butterflies, glitter, unicorns, it's not always going to be all of these beautiful, wonderful things when I have to take the responsibility
Hmm.
of what I'm putting out into the world. Sometimes that does mean that I'm going to have to do or say something that is like, I don't want to do this. This is uncomfortable. I have to have
Right.
an uncomfortable conversation. I
Yeah.
have to say, I don't like the work. I have to tell somebody no.
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
honoring the energy that that takes out of us to have
Absolutely.
that difficult conversation, or have to say no, or have to do that
Hmm.
thing that we feel is unkind, but it's
Hmm.
not that it's unkind, it's that it's necessary. And we have a
Hmm.
responsibility to do that so that we are a part of those reciprocal relationships, those mutually beneficial relationships, and to make sure that we are protecting ourselves, our peace, and not allowing other people to drain us of our energy because we won't take responsibility for protecting it.
Yeah, exactly. I so agree. I feel like just being authentic, really, and being rooted in your own self and understanding and respecting your own requests within your own self. You don't even have to voice anything at this point, but just really knowing what your own request would be for you and really honoring that part, really honoring you just as you honor him and as he honors you. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
I feel like, yeah, it's the authenticity of oneself is probably the biggest gift that we got besides our name. There's just only one us out there, and why waste time to be anything or anyone different when we were created so beautifully, and we are our unique self. But this was such a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful conversation, Jess. I'm so grateful and I'm so happy that you came today and that you took time out of your schedule. And I don't know, I'm so excited, obviously, to come and see you on your podcast. Everybody can go. Such good podcast too. But thank you so much for coming. Thank you for this wonderful, open, transparent conversation. You dropped so many dimes today. So, I feel like when I go back in this episode, I'm gonna produce like 5 shirts with like 5 quotes, you know? So this was really wonderful. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and your growth and your beautiful light. You're such a beautiful human. So I'm so happy that you came and you've been my guest today.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Thank you for your openness, honesty, transparency, for us to even have a real conversation. And thanks for exposing me to your audience, and helping me to be able to do and fulfill my purpose in the world. I really appreciate you. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Well, podcast lovers, another great one down. And as always, if you have something on your heart, if there's something you want to talk about, my mic is open. Come enjoy R&R. Let's go. Let's help somebody out there with your story. Until then, stay rooted, stay grounded, always stay connected to love, the strongest force in the universe.